The global resource fight is entering a new phase, and rare earths are again the pressure point. Western governments are alarmed because China still controls the materials needed for advanced modern technology. After years of reshoring promises, key industrial networks remain tied to China.
This is beef, this is chicken. The Chinese have also agreed to review a bunch of our biotechnology traits, right, where we have certain goods that go to China that have to be approved scientifically. And we have the 200 Boeings that they've agreed to do. This is all on top of the 25 million metric tons of soybeans.
Greer listed large commercial items, and they gave Washington something to present publicly. But none of them solves the main strategic weakness. There was no major semiconductor breakthrough. There was no removal of chip sanctions. There was no massive reopening of advanced technology exports. And on rare earths, Beijing only said it would address the issue, which means Washington left without a real supply guarantee. So, no binding commitments and no long-term supply security arrangement. China still controls the rare earth system that the United States needs for semiconductors, magnets, missile systems, interceptor missiles, military hardware, electric vehicles, and advanced manufacturing. This is the real pressure point. Back in May 2025, Chinese rare earth exports collapsed from around 700 tons a month to below 50 tons. That single drop showed how quickly Beijing can create pressure across the industrial system if it restricts supply. Almost 70% of all U.S. rare earth imports come directly from China. For certain materials like scandium and yttrium, dependence is effectively near total, with almost 100% reliance in some areas. So every discussion about reshoring runs into the same question. Even if America builds new factories, even if it spends billions on industrial policy, where do the critical materials come from? This is why the issue goes far beyond trade headlines. Rare earths are the base layer under chips, AI, defense production, and the Taiwan supply chain risk that Washington keeps warning about. That supply chain risk is exactly why companies like NVIDIA remain exposed. NVIDIA depends on a wider technology network that reaches across chips, foundries, equipment, materials, assembly, and advanced components. That network is still connected to China and Taiwan. So the rare earth problem quickly becomes a semiconductor problem, an AI problem, and a national security problem. Taiwan sits at the center of this pressure. It remains one of the most important places in the world for advanced chip production. If tensions around Taiwan rise, the risk is not limited to one island or one military scenario. It reaches the entire Western technology system. Data centers, AI models, defense platforms, cloud infrastructure, and advanced manufacturing all depend on stable semiconductor flows. That is why American politicians keep speaking about Taiwan with such urgency.
So let's make it clear to China, if you try to take Taiwan by force, here's what happens to your economy on day one. I'm hoping the administration would support that. In terms of weapon sales, it's up to the president. I would encourage him to make Taiwan strong so we can deter aggression.
Graham's warning shows how seriously Washington views the risk. His message is aimed at deterrence, weapons sales, and the economic cost China could face in a Taiwan conflict. The deeper fear is supply chain disruption. If China controls key critical materials and Taiwan remains central to advanced chip production, then the United States faces exposure on both sides of the technology chain. This is also why the rare earth issue cannot be separated from NVIDIA, AI, and defense production. The same pressure runs through all of them. America can spend more, build more, and promise more reshoring, but the industrial base still needs secure materials, stable chip flows, and reliable processing capacity. That is exactly where Australia enters the picture. Australia is becoming one of Washington's main answers to China's rare earth dominance. In 2025, the United States signed a major framework agreement with Australia focused on critical minerals, rare earth supply, and supply chain security. The goal is clear: build a more protected supply chain for the commercial and defense industries of both countries. The wording of that agreement matters. It emphasized securing raw and processed critical minerals and rare earths that are crucial to the commercial and defense industries of both the United States and Australia. That tells us what the real objective is. Washington wants a protected supply chain that is less exposed to Chinese control. Australia has the resources, the political alignment, and the strategic location to become a key part of that plan. Now, Australia is moving even further. It recently ordered Chinese investors to dump their stakes in certain rare earth projects within weeks. One of the biggest examples is Northern Minerals, where Chinese-linked investments are being forced out quickly. From Beijing's perspective, this can easily be seen as a provocative move because China has been trying to diversify its own supply chain exposure through overseas investments. Australia is now pushing Chinese capital out of strategic mineral assets. The problem for the West is that removing Chinese investors does not automatically create a full rare earth supply chain. China still holds the dominant position. It has the world's largest rare earth reserves, around 7 times larger than Australia's own reserves, and the deeper control is in processing. By 2030, projections still show China maintaining over 50% of global rare earth mining, around 70% of refining capacity, and roughly 85% of global magnet production. These numbers show why the challenge is structural. Mining more rare earths is only one part of the story. The real choke points are refining, separation, processing, and magnet production. So Australia can restrict Chinese ownership and Washington can sign new frameworks, but replacing China's full ecosystem will take years. That creates a serious risk for Australia because its own economy remains deeply tied to China. China has several ways to respond. It can reduce new investment, slow foreign direct investment, weaken commodity cooperation, or create pressure around Australian exports and strategic projects. Australia is deeply tied to China through trade and commodities. Rare earth policy may start inside mining, but the impact can move into a much wider economic relationship. If this conflict intensifies, Australia may find itself protecting one strategic sector while exposing other parts of its economy to Chinese blowback. This is where the story becomes bigger than rare earths. Washington and its allies are trying to confront China over critical minerals as America escalates pressure on Iran. So the United States is trying to manage a resource fight, a sanctions campaign, an inflation problem, and a bond market crisis all at once. During the China visit, there was even an awkward moment where Chinese security reportedly stopped Besant because he forgot his access pass and could not enter until he properly displayed it. It was a small moment, but symbolically it captured the wider reality. Washington was not operating from a position of overwhelming leverage. And almost immediately after leaving China, Besant moved straight back to pressuring allies over Iran. Washington is now dealing with 2 pressure points at once: rare earth supply chains on one side, and oil, inflation, and financial stability on the other. His message to the G7, Europe, and broader allies was direct.
Tomorrow we'll also be discussing sanctions and terror finance, and we call upon all our G7 and indeed all of our allies and the rest of the world to follow the sanctions regime so that we can crack down on the illicit finance that is fueling the Iranian war machine and get this money back to the Iranian people.
The problem for Washington is time. Iran has lived under sanctions for years. The United States has already sanctioned it, isolated it, frozen assets, weaponized the financial system, and pressured trade routes and sea lanes. Iran is still functioning. That creates a hard question for Besant and the G7. How much more pressure can they add before the cost starts feeding back into their own economies? The pressure is already visible inside the United States. Official CPI inflation is around 3.8%. Bank of America is warning that inflation could move toward 5.2% by the time of the U.S. midterm elections. That would be a serious political problem for Trump after years of inflation fatigue. American consumers barely moved past the Biden-era price shock, and another surge would hit food, fuel, borrowing costs, rent, mortgages, and household budgets. Oil makes the situation even more difficult. The IMF is warning that elevated oil prices could push the world toward recession-like conditions. A prolonged oil shock above $100 per barrel could crush global growth. If oil spikes toward $120, the risk of a technical global recession becomes highly probable. America's allies are also under pressure. Europe and other G7 economies are already dealing with rising yields, slower growth, weaker consumption, and bond market stress. so every new sanctions push carries a wider economic cost. The Iran pressure campaign may strengthen Washington's geopolitical message, and the inflation, oil, and bond market effects move straight into the Federal Reserve's problem. The Federal Reserve is now pulled into this same chain reaction. If inflation rises again, the Fed may need to hike rates to defend its credibility. If it hikes too aggressively, it risks damaging housing, credit, consumption, investment, and the bond market at the same time. The numbers show how tight this situation has become. If inflation moves toward 5%, then Fed funds may need to move back toward 5.5% or even 6% to regain control. The US economy may not withstand that level of tightening anymore. Deficits are exploding, housing is already weak, and the debt burden is massive. Kevin Warsh sounds ready for a hard line. He talks about inflation credibility, tighter policy, and a smaller balance sheet.
Well, the inflation, that's not really the central bank's fault. That's because of Putin and the pandemic. Nonsense. A change in prices happens in a market economy because of shocks in the world. Changes in prices happen every day. That's not what inflation is. Inflation is when that change in prices become embedded. It's second and third order effects. And that's what's been the biggest harm to the country. My recommendation is a smaller balance sheet.
Warsh's argument is clear. Inflation becomes dangerous when price shocks move into second and third order effects. That is exactly why the Fed cannot simply ignore a new inflation surge. The question is whether he would really push aggressive tightening into this environment. The bond market is already sending a warning. The 30-year Treasury yield is above 5.11%, its highest level since 2007. One wrong move could trigger weaker consumption, credit stress, investment freezes, and broader market instability. This is especially important because AI infrastructure spending is now one of the biggest pillars supporting the US economy. Data centers, chip buying, cloud infrastructure, networking systems, and big tech investment now account for around 2% of US GDP directly. If financing conditions tighten further, this spending cycle could slow sharply, and recession risks could rise fast. A rate cut brings its own risk. If the Fed cuts too aggressively while inflation remains high, long-term yields could rise because markets may lose confidence. Trump wants lower long-term yields, and Bessent focuses heavily on the 10-year Treasury yield. The Fed has already carried out roughly $260 billion in Treasury support operations since December. More intervention may weaken confidence in the dollar system itself. That may explain why Goldman Sachs expects central banks to buy around 60 tons of gold a month. The world is already hedging against a more unstable dollar system. And if every new pressure campaign creates another market shock, Washington's room to maneuver keeps getting smaller. So what do you think? Will China retaliate after Australia restricted Chinese investment in rare earth projects? And will the G7 fully follow Bessent's push to tighten sanctions against Iran? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. See you in the next one.